The radar screen flickered green against Staff Sergeant Kira, Phoenix, Valdez's weathered face, its electronic heartbeat the only sound in the cramped observation post overlooking the Kandahar Valley. She'd been watching the same empty coordinates for 72 hours straight, her eyes burning from the cathode ray glow, when the Afghan girl appeared at the chain-link perimeter fence. The child couldn't have been more than 8, her small fingers wrapped around the metal diamonds, pointing directly at the blank sector where Bravo Company's convoy had vanished 3 days ago. "What's she doing?" Corporal Martinez whispered, lowering his binoculars. Kira didn't answer. She was staring at the radar, where a faint blip had just materialized, exactly where the girl was pointing. The signal was weak, intermittent but unmistakably there. Her breath caught in her throat. The missing convoy's last known position had been grid reference 31 RPP 12,345, 67,890. The blip was pulsing at 31 RPP 12,347, 67,892, less than 200 meters away. "Impossible," she breathed, her finger hovering over the communication switch. The convoy's IFF transponders had gone dark when they'd driven into what intelligence called a communication shadow, a dead zone where Taliban jammers had supposedly neutralized all electronic signals. But if the girl could see something they couldn't, if she was pointing at exactly where their lost soldiers were transmitting from. The child's eyes met hers through the fence, ancient and knowing despite her youth. In that moment, Kira felt the weight of every decision that had led her here, from the flight academy where instructors had called her too emotional for combat operations, to the grounding that had landed her in this forgotten outpost, watching screens instead of flying missions. Her call sign, Phoenix, had once meant something. Now it felt like a cruel joke. "Base, this is Observation Post Delta," she said into her headset, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We have a potential contact at grid 31 RPP 12,347, 67,892. Weak signal, intermittent." The response crackled through static. "Delta, negative contact showing on our scopes. Maintain observation." Kira's jaw tightened. The girl was still pointing, still staring at her with those impossibly knowing eyes. The radar blip pulsed once more, stronger this time, before fading back to nothing. She thought of Captain Morrison and his men, their families waiting for news, their radios silent for 3 days. The official word was that they'd taken a wrong turn, driven into an ambush, been captured or killed. But what if they were still out there, still alive? Their signals somehow reaching only this forgotten hilltop where a disgraced pilot and an Afghan child watched the sky. The stakes had never been higher. The mystery had just begun. Major General Patricia Iron Hawthorne's voice cut through the static like a blade through silk, her tone carrying the authority of someone who had never been told she couldn't fly because she was too small, too emotional, too female. "All units, this is Bagram Command. We have authorization for immediate tactical reconnaissance of grid sector 31 RPP. Phoenix, you're cleared for emergency reactivation." Kira's hands trembled as she reached for her flight helmet, the one she hadn't worn in 8 months. The weight of it felt foreign now, like putting on someone else's skin. Through the observation post's cracked window, she could see the girl still standing at the fence, her small hand now pressed flat against the metal, palm outward in what looked almost like a blessing. "Phoenix, this is Tower Control," came the voice of Lieutenant Commander James Radar Kowalski, her former wingman. "You sure you're ready for this? It's been a while since you've been in the cockpit." 8 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days to be exact. Since the incident over Helmand Province, when she disobeyed direct orders to pursue what she'd thought was a downed pilot's emergency beacon. It had turned out to be a Taliban trap, and her unauthorized rescue attempt had nearly cost 3 other aircraft their lives. The review board had been swift and merciless. Pilot shows poor judgment under pressure. Recommend immediate grounding pending psychological evaluation. But now, as she strapped herself into the cockpit of the A-10 Thunderbolt II, its twin engines humming with barely contained power, Kira felt something she hadn't experienced in months: purpose. The radar had shown 17 separate contacts in the past hour, all corresponding to the girl's pointing. Either they were dealing with the most sophisticated electronic warfare operation in theater, or something impossible was happening in the mountains of Afghanistan. "Tower Phoenix," she said, her voice carrying across the radio waves to a dozen listening posts. "I'm ready." The A-10's engine spooled up with a throaty roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Earth. Through her heads-up display, she could see the targeting coordinates updating in real time, the green glow of the radar painting ghosts across her visor. The girl had disappeared from the fence, but somehow Kira knew she was still watching, still pointing toward whatever truth lay hidden in those mountains. As the aircraft lifted off, banking toward the coordinates where Bravo Company had vanished, Kira caught a glimpse of her reflection in the cockpit glass. The woman staring back at her looked older than her 34 years, weathered by doubt and failure. But her eyes held something that hadn't been there in months: hope. The radio crackled with updates from ground control, weather reports, tactical advisories. But underneath it all, Kira could swear she heard something else. A faint signal, almost like a heartbeat, pulsing from the coordinates ahead. Staff Sergeant Alina Compass Rodriguez had been tracking the phantom signals for 6 hours when the first photograph came through. The drone footage showed what appeared to be a standard Taliban position: sandbags, camouflage netting, the usual defensive setup. But Rodriguez had spent 3 tours studying insurgent tactics, and something about this position felt wrong. "The angles are all off," she told Captain David Hawk Chen, spreading the reconnaissance photos across the map table. "Look at the gun emplacements. They're not covering the valley approaches. They're pointing inward, like they're guarding something instead of watching for attacks." Chen studied the images through his magnifying glass, his brow furrowed with concentration. He'd been in-country for 18 months, had seen every type of Taliban fortification imaginable. But Rodriguez was right. This didn't match any known pattern. "What do you think they're protecting?" he asked. Before Rodriguez could answer, the radio crackled to life. "Ground control, this is Phoenix. I'm approaching the target coordinates, requesting permission to conduct low-level reconnaissance." The voice belonged to Kira Valdez, the pilot who'd been grounded after the Helmand incident. Chen had heard the stories: how she'd ignored orders, how she'd put her squadron at risk chasing ghosts. But he'd also heard the other stories, the ones whispered in the mess halls and ready rooms, about her uncanny ability to find down pilots, about the 17 successful rescues she'd conducted before her fall from grace. "Phoenix Ground Control," Rodriguez spoke into her headset. "Be advised, we're tracking multiple signals in your target area. Electronic signature suggests possible POW situation." The pause that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then, "Copy that compass, beginning descent." Through the observation post's high-powered telescope, Chen watched the A-10 drop from the sky like a predatory bird, its distinctive silhouette unmistakable against the Afghan mountains. The aircraft's twin engines left contrails that dissipated quickly in the thin air, but its presence seemed to change something fundamental about the landscape below. "I'm seeing movement," Rodriguez reported, her eyes pressed to the scope. "Multiple figures approximately 2 clicks from the reported position. They're waving." Chen grabbed his binoculars and trained them on the coordinates. Through the wavering heat distortion, he could make out what looked like human figures emerging from camouflaged positions. But these weren't insurgents, they were wearing American uniforms. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "It's them, it's Bravo Company." The radio exploded with chatter as the discovery rippled through the command structure. But Rodriguez was still focused on her scope, tracking the electronic signatures that had led them here. The signals were stronger now, more coherent, as if the presence of the A-10 had somehow amplified them. Phoenix, she called into her headset, I need you to maintain your current altitude and bearing. The signals are getting stronger. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the radio like a ghost returning from the dead. Any station, this is Bravo 6. We are alive and have been maintaining radio silence per operational security protocols. Request immediate extraction. The words hit the command center like a physical blow. For 3 days, everyone had assumed the worst. The families had been notified, the memorial services planned, the casualty reports filed. But here was Morrison's voice, clear and strong, broadcasting from coordinates that had been dark for 72 hours. Bravo 6, this is Bagram Command, came General Hawthorne's voice cutting through the chaos. Confirm your position and status. Bagram Command, we are approximately 2 clicks northeast of our last reported position. We have sustained minimal casualties and are in defensive positions. We've been tracking hostile forces and maintaining communications blackout to avoid detection. Colonel Marcus Steele Thompson, the operations commander, leaned into his microphone. Morrison, explain your communications blackout. We've had search and rescue operations running for 3 days. The pause was longer this time, filled with the static of military radios and the distant sound of rotor blades. When Morrison's voice returned, it carried a weight that everyone in the command center could feel. Sir, we've been monitoring Taliban communications. They've been using our standard frequencies to coordinate attacks on search and rescue operations. We made the decision to maintain radio silence to protect incoming aircraft. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If Morrison was telling the truth, then Bravo Company hadn't been captured or killed. They'd been protecting the very rescue operations sent to find them. But that raised another question. How had they been able to communicate now? And why had only the observation post been able to detect their signals? Phoenix, this is Command. General Hawthorne's voice cut through the chatter. What's your assessment of the situation? Kira's response came through crystal clear, as if she were speaking from the next room instead of flying through hostile airspace. Command, I'm observing what appears to be a well-fortified position with multiple American personnel. Visual confirmation of at least 12 individuals in U.S. military uniforms. They appear to be in good condition and are signaling for extraction. But even as she spoke, Kira was seeing something else through her cockpit's targeting system. The thermal imaging showed heat signatures that didn't match human beings, geometric patterns that suggested electronic equipment, power sources, transmission arrays. The Taliban position Rodriguez had identified wasn't just guarding Bravo Company. It was housing something else entirely. Command, Phoenix. I'm detecting additional electronic signatures in the target area. Recommend caution on extraction operations. The first Taliban surface-to-air missile streaked past Phoenix's starboard wing like a comet made of death and mathematics. Kira threw the A-10 into a hard left bank, the G-forces pressing her deep into her ejection seat as the missile's exhaust trail painted a white scar across the Afghan sky. Phoenix taking fire, she called into her radio, her voice steady despite the fact that her heart was hammering against her ribs. SAM launch from grid 31 RPP 12,350 67,895. Evasive maneuvers in progress. The second missile was already climbing toward her, its seeker head locked onto the A-10's heat signature. But Kira had flown through worse, had danced with death in skis over Iraq and Afghanistan for 8 years before the grounding. She knew the Thunderbolt's capabilities like she knew her own heartbeat. She rolled inverted and dove toward the valley floor, the altimeter spinning backward as she dropped below the missile's minimum engagement altitude. The warhead detonated harmlessly above her, its fragments sparking off the A-10's titanium armor like rain on a tin roof. Nice flying, Phoenix, came Rodriguez's voice from the observation post. But we've got bigger problems. I'm tracking 6 more SAM sites coming online. They've been waiting for you." The tactical display in Kira's cockpit lit up with threat indicators, red diamonds marking hostile positions, yellow caution symbols showing potential engagement zones. But she was also seeing something else. The electronic signatures Rodriguez had been tracking were moving, converging on Bravo Company's position. "Command Phoenix, the electronic signatures are mobile. Repeat, we're dealing with mobile transmitters, not fixed installations." General Hawthorne's voice cut through the radio chatter. "Phoenix, clarify your statement." "Ma'am, the signals that led us to Bravo Company, they're not coming from our people. They're coming from Taliban electronic warfare units. This whole thing is a trap." The silence that followed was deafening. In the command center, staff officers looked at each other with growing horror as the implications became clear. The girl at the fence, the mysterious signals, the perfect coordination, all of it had been orchestrated to draw American aircraft into a carefully prepared killing zone. "Bravo 6, this is command." General Hawthorne's voice carried a new urgency. "What is your tactical assessment of the situation?" Morrison's response came through heavy static. "Command, we are taking fire from multiple directions. The Taliban have been using our position as bait. They've got us surrounded, and they're using some kind of electronic warfare system to mimic our radio signatures." Kira was already climbing back toward the threat envelope, her targeting system painting laser designators on the SAM sites below. The A-10's GAU-8 Avenger cannon was loaded with 1,174 rounds of 30 depleted uranium ammunition, each round capable of penetrating armor or reducing a fortified position to rubble. "Command Phoenix, requesting permission to engage hostile positions." "Negative Phoenix, too much risk of friendly fire. We need positive identification of all targets." But even as the words came through her headset, Kira could see the tactical situation deteriorating. The Taliban had turned Bravo Company's position into a fortress, with interlocking fields of fire that would make any rescue attempt suicide. Worse, they were using the American soldiers as human shields, positioning their weapons emplacements within meters of the defensive positions. "Command, this is Phoenix. I have an idea, but it's going to require everyone to trust me." The pause stretched forever. Then General Hawthorne's voice came back. "Phoenix, you're cleared for tactical discretion, but if you're wrong about this—" "I understand, ma'am. Phoenix out." Kira pulled the A-10 into a steep climb, gaining altitude until the entire valley spread out below her like a three-dimensional chessboard. The Taliban positions were clearly visible now, a complex web of fortifications designed to funnel any rescue attempt into predetermined kill zones. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed the Americans would follow standard doctrine. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez watched through her scope as the A-10 climbed higher and higher, until it was just a dark speck against the afternoon sky. She'd worked with enough pilots to know that altitude was usually safety, but in this case, it was making Phoenix an easier target for the longer-range missiles. "What's she doing?" Captain Chen asked, his own binoculars trained on the aircraft. "I don't know," Rodriguez admitted, "but she's climbing through the engagement envelope of every SAM system in the valley." The radio crackled with updates from various units. "Phoenix, you're climbing through 15,000 feet. Recommend immediate descent." "Phoenix, multiple missile locks detected. Suggest evasive action." "Phoenix, respond to this transmission." But Kira's voice, when it finally came through, was calm and focused. "All units, this is Phoenix. I need everyone to trust me for the next 60 seconds. Do not engage any targets until I give the all-clear." High above the valley, Kira was seeing the battlefield with perfect clarity. The Taliban electronic warfare units were positioned in a rough circle around Bravo Company's location, their transmitters creating a web of false signals designed to confuse rescue operations. But the system had a weakness. It relied on line-of-sight communications between the individual units. She rolled the A-10 inverted and began a controlled dive that would have made her flight instructors proud. But instead of aiming for the obvious targets, the SAM sites and machine gun nests, she was targeting the communication relays hidden in the rocks between the main positions. The first burst from the GAU-8 cannon sounded like the voice of an angry god, 2,000 rounds per minute of depleted uranium cutting through the air with surgical precision. The communication relay disappeared in a shower of sparks and smoke, its destruction rippling through the Taliban network like a virus. Phoenix, this is Bravo 6. We're seeing immediate confusion in enemy positions. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. Kira was already lining up her second target, another communication node hidden in what looked like a pile of innocent rocks. The A-10's targeting system had locked onto the electronic signature, and she squeezed the trigger again. The second relay exploded in a fireball that was visible from the observation post. Rodriguez watched through her scope as Taliban fighters began emerging from their positions, apparently trying to re-establish communications with their command structure. Now, Kira's voice came through the radio, cold and professional. All units engage at will. The network is down. The valley erupted in coordinated violence as American forces struck from every direction. Artillery rounds walked across the Taliban positions with mathematical precision, while helicopter gunships emerged from concealed positions to engage the now isolated SAM sites. The carefully orchestrated trap had become a killing field, but this time it was the insurgents who were caught in the crossfire. Through it all, Kira maintained her orbit above the battle, her targeting system painting laser designators on enemy positions for the ground forces below. The grounded pilot had become the conductor of a deadly symphony, orchestrating the destruction of an enemy that had spent days preparing for this moment. Phoenix, this is Command. Outstanding work. You've turned the tactical situation around completely. But Kira wasn't done yet. Through her targeting system, she could see something the ground forces had missed. A large electronic signature hidden in a cave system approximately 500 meters from Bravo Company's position. The signature was unlike anything in the standard threat database, too large to be a simple communication relay, too complex to be a standard jamming system. Command, Phoenix. I'm detecting a major electronic signature in grid 31 RPP 12,355, 67,890. Recommend immediate investigation. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah, Viper, Martinez had been monitoring the radio traffic from her position in the Tactical Operations Center when the significance of Phoenix's discovery hit her. The electronic signature Kira had identified wasn't just another Taliban communication system. It was broadcasting on frequencies that matched American military satellites. "Get me a direct line to Washington," she told her communications officer. "Priority Alpha." The secure satellite link crackled to life within seconds, connecting the operations center to the Pentagon's National Military Command Center. "This is General Patricia Hawthorne, requesting immediate consultation with the Joint Chiefs regarding a potential security breach." While the secure communications were being established, Martinez pulled up the classified database of known Taliban capabilities. What she found made her blood run cold. The electronic signature Phoenix had detected matched the characteristics of a Russian-made R-330ZH Zhitl electronic warfare system, equipment that was supposed to be impossible for the Taliban to acquire or operate. "Command, this is Phoenix," Kira's voice cut through the tension. "I'm going to need clearance to investigate that cave system. The electronic signature is unlike anything I've seen." Martinez looked at the tactical display, where red icons showed the positions of Taliban forces still engaged with American ground units. The cave system was in a relatively secure area, but it was also beyond the range of effective ground support. Phoenix, be advised that investigation of the cave system is outside the parameters of your current mission. Recommend return to base for refuel and briefing. Ma'am, with respect, that electronic signature is still active and still broadcasting. If the Taliban have access to advanced electronic warfare systems, it changes everything about this operation. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of distant explosions and the chatter of ongoing tactical operations. Martinez knew that Kira was right. The implications of advanced electronic warfare capabilities in Taliban hands were staggering. But she also knew that sending a single A-10 to investigate was potentially suicide. Phoenix, hold your position. We're vectoring additional assets to your location. But even as she spoke, Martinez was watching the tactical display with growing alarm. The electronic signature was moving, its signal strength fluctuating in a pattern that suggested it was being prepared for transport. Whatever the Taliban had hidden in that cave system, they were getting ready to move it. Command Phoenix, the signature is mobile. Repeat, target appears to be preparing for relocation. The decision tree was clear. Either commit additional resources to investigate the unknown electronic warfare system, or risk allowing it to escape and potentially be used against American forces in the future. Martinez made the call that would define the rest of the operation. Phoenix, you are cleared for reconnaissance of the cave system. All available assets are being vectored to provide support. But Phoenix, her voice carried a weight that transcended military protocol. Be careful, we don't know what we're dealing with. High above the valley, Kira banked the A-10 toward the cave system, her targeting sensors probing the darkness for any sign of what lay hidden within. The electronic signature was stronger now, more coherent, as if her approach had somehow activated dormant systems. Through her headset, she could hear the voices of pilots and ground controllers coordinating the rescue of Bravo Company, the successful engagement of Taliban forces, the restoration of communications throughout the valley. But she was also hearing something else, a faint signal that seemed to be coming from the cave system itself. It sounded almost like music. The cave mouth yawned before Kira like the entrance to another world, its darkness so complete that even her night vision system struggled to penetrate it. She throttled back the A-10's engines and began a careful approach, her targeting sensors painting the rocky walls with invisible lasers. Phoenix, this is Overlord, came the voice of General Hawthorne. Satellite imagery shows the cave system extends approximately 800 meters into the mountain. Be advised, we're detecting movement inside. Kira's hands tightened on the controls as she processed the information. The cave wasn't just a hiding place. It was a complex installation, possibly with multiple levels and defensive positions. And if there was movement inside, it meant the Taliban were either preparing to fight or preparing to flee. Overlord Phoenix, I'm detecting multiple electronic signatures inside the cave system. The signals are unusual. Define unusual, Phoenix. Kira studied her targeting display, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The electronic signatures were arranged in geometric patterns that didn't match any known military installation. They were too regular, too precisely positioned to be random. It was as if someone had built a technological mandala in the heart of the mountain. Overlord, the signatures are arranged in a perfect hexagonal pattern. 6 primary nodes with smaller relays positioned at precise intervals. This isn't Taliban construction. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. If the installation wasn't Taliban, then who had built it? And why had it been hidden in the mountains of Afghanistan? Phoenix, this is Dr. Marcus Webb from the Defense Intelligence Agency, came a new voice on the radio. Can you describe the electronic emissions in more detail? Kira focused her sensors on the cave entrance, letting the A-10's sophisticated electronics suite analyze the signals. What she found defied explanation. The emissions weren't just communication signals. They were data streams, complex digital transmissions that seemed to be downloading information from multiple sources simultaneously. Dr. Webb, I'm detecting what appears to be satellite uplink transmissions, cellular network monitoring, and something that looks like it might be internet traffic analysis. The system is pulling data from multiple sources and processing it in real time. The silence that followed was deafening. In the Tactical Operations Center, Dr. Webb was staring at classified documents that suddenly took on new meaning. The electronic warfare system wasn't just jamming American communications. It was intercepting and analyzing them, building a comprehensive picture of American military capabilities and intentions. Phoenix, this is General Hawthorne. You are to withdraw immediately and establish a perimeter around the cave system. Do not repeat, do not attempt to enter the installation. But even as the order came through her headset, Kira was seeing something that changed everything. Through her targeting system, she could detect human heat signatures moving through the cave, not Taliban fighters, but what appeared to be prisoners or hostages, and their thermal signatures suggested they were Americans. Overlord, I'm detecting American personnel inside the cave system. Multiple heat signatures, approximately 12 individuals, appear to be restrained or incapacitated. The radio erupted with chatter as the discovery rippled through the command structure. If there were American prisoners in the cave, then the situation had just become infinitely more complex. They couldn't simply destroy the installation. They had to mount a rescue operation. Phoenix, can you confirm the identity of the personnel? Kira pushed the A-10 sensors to their limits, trying to get a clearer picture of what lay inside the cave. The thermal imaging showed human figures arranged in what looked like a circular pattern, each one connected to the electronic systems by cables or wires. It was unlike anything she'd seen in 8 years of combat operations. Overlord, I cannot confirm identity, but the personnel appear to be connected to the electronic systems. This might be more than just a prison. The words hung in the air like an accusation. If Americans were being used as part of the electronic warfare system, then the situation had moved beyond simple combat operations into something far more sinister. Master Sergeant Diana, Reaper, Santos had been monitoring the tactical frequency when the transmission came through that changed everything. The voice was weak, distorted by electronic interference, but unmistakably American. Any station, this is Captain Jennifer Martinez, serial number 274985637. We are being held in an underground facility and used as components in some kind of electronic system. The transmission lasted only 12 seconds before cutting to static, but those 12 seconds revolutionized the understanding of what was happening in the cave. Santos immediately began triangulating the signal, her electronic warfare training coming into focus like a weapon being aimed. Phoenix, this is Reaper. I'm tracking secondary Taliban forces moving through the upper cave system. They're trying to flank your position. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Kira was flying through a three-dimensional battlefield, with enemy forces above, below, and on all sides. The A-10's armor was designed to withstand ground fire, but the confined space of the cave system amplified the effects of every explosion. Reaper, Phoenix, I need targeting data on those secondary positions. Through her headset, she could hear the voices of the freed prisoners as they moved through the cave system, their radio discipline perfect despite the chaos around them. They were professional soldiers, and they were adapting to the situation with the fluid efficiency that had made them valuable targets for the Taliban's electronic warfare system. Phoenix, this is Martinez. We're encountering resistance in the secondary tunnel, multiple hostiles armed with automatic weapons. The sound of gunfire echoed through the cave system, mixing with the roar of the A-10's engines to create a symphony of violence that seemed to shake the very foundations of the mountain. Kira was already turning toward the secondary tunnel, her targeting system painting laser designators on the Taliban positions. Martinez, keep your people moving. I'm coming to you. The A-10 banked through a passage that seemed impossibly narrow, its wingtips nearly scraping the rocky walls. But Kira had been flying combat missions for 8 years, and she knew the aircraft's capabilities better than she knew her own limitations. The second burst from the GAU-8 cannon was even more devastating than the first, the concentrated firepower of the 30 rounds turning the secondary tunnel into a storm of flying rock and metal. The Taliban fighters who had been preparing to ambush the prisoners were scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Phoenix, this is Martinez. The secondary tunnel is clear. We're moving toward the main entrance. But even as the words came through her headset, Kira was seeing something on her targeting system that made her blood run cold. The electronic warfare system they damaged wasn't just processing intelligence. It was controlling other systems throughout the cave complex. And those systems were powering up for what looked like a final, desperate gambit. All units, this is Phoenix. The electronic system is activating some kind of self-destruct sequence. I'm seeing power surges throughout the cave complex. The implications were staggering. If the Taliban were willing to destroy the entire installation to prevent its capture, then the intelligence value of the system was even greater than anyone had imagined. But it also meant that everyone in the cave, prisoners and rescuers alike, had minutes to escape before the mountain came down around them. Martinez, you need to move faster. The entire cave system is about to collapse. Captain Martinez's voice came through the radio with the calm professionalism of someone who had faced death before and refused to be intimidated by it. Phoenix, we're encountering heavy resistance near the main entrance. At least 15 Taliban fighters in prepared positions. Kira was already pushing the A-10 toward the main entrance, her targeting system painting the enemy positions with laser designators. But she was also calculating the tactical mathematics of the situation, and the numbers weren't encouraging. The cave entrance was a natural choke point, and the Taliban had had time to prepare defensive positions that would be difficult to assault even with the A-10's firepower. Martinez, I need you to fall back to the first junction and wait for my signal. Phoenix, we don't have time for complex maneuvers. The power surges are getting stronger. Through her sensors, Kira could see the electronic systems throughout the cave complex beginning to overload, their power signatures climbing toward critical levels. The Taliban had turned their most valuable intelligence asset into a massive bomb, and the countdown had already begun. Martinez, trust me. Fall back to the first junction and wait for my signal. The A-10's engines spooled up to maximum power as Kira began her final approach to the cave entrance. Through her targeting system, she could see the Taliban fighters in their defensive positions, their weapons trained on the passage where they expected the prisoners to appear. But they weren't expecting an A-10 Thunderbolt II to come screaming out of the cave at full throttle, its GAU-8 cannon already spinning up to firing speed. The final burst from the cannon was like the voice of an angry god, 2,000 rounds per minute of depleted uranium, turning the cave entrance into a scene from the apocalypse. The Taliban fighters who had been waiting in ambush were scattered like toys, their defensive positions reduced to rubble and smoke. Martinez, go, the entrance is clear. The freed prisoners emerged from the cave like ghosts returning from the dead, their faces pale but their movements purposeful. They'd been through months of captivity, had been used as components in an electronic warfare system, had survived a running battle through a collapsing cave system. But they were still soldiers, and they were still fighting. Phoenix, this is Martinez. All personnel are clear of the cave system. Thanks for the ride. Kira banked the A-10 away from the mountain just as the electronic systems reached critical overload. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit, a pillar of fire and smoke that rose from the cave entrance like a signal flare shot into the sky. The mountain shook, the cave system collapsed, and the Taliban's most sophisticated electronic warfare installation was reduced to rubble and twisted metal. But the intelligence it had gathered, the techniques it had used, the implications of its very existence, those would echo through the halls of the Pentagon for years to come. Phoenix, this is Overlord. Outstanding work. Return to base for debrief. High above the valley, Kira felt the weight of the past 8 months lifting from her shoulders like smoke dispersing in the wind. The grounding, the doubt, the whispered conversations about her fitness for command, all of it seemed insignificant now compared to the 12 lives she just saved and the intelligence disaster she just prevented. But as she banked the A-10 toward Bagram Air Base, she caught sight of something that made her smile. Standing at the perimeter fence of the observation post, barely visible through the heat distortion, was a small figure with dark hair and knowing eyes. The Afghan girl was still there, still watching, still pointing toward the sky where Phoenix had learned to fly again. 3 weeks later, Major Kira Phoenix Valdez stood in the briefing room at Bagram Air Base, her dress uniform crisp and her decorations gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The promotion ceremony had been swift and decisive, her reinstatement to active flight status accompanied by a commendation that would follow her for the rest of her military career. The events of July 16th represent a turning point in our understanding of asymmetric warfare, General Hawthorne was saying to the assembled officers and intelligence personnel. The Taliban's use of neural interface technology to process American military intelligence represents a new category of threat that we must prepare to counter. The classified briefing that followed painted a picture of a conflict that had evolved far beyond conventional warfare. The cave system had contained not just the electronic warfare equipment, but also technical manuals, training materials, and communication logs that suggested similar installations might exist throughout the theater of operations. Major Valdez, General Hawthorne continued, your actions not only saved the lives of 12 American service members, but also prevented a potential intelligence catastrophe that could have compromised operations throughout the region. Kira stood at attention, her mind still processing the implications of what they'd discovered. The Taliban hadn't just captured American soldiers, they'd found a way to weaponize human intelligence, to turn the very thought processes of their prisoners into tools of war. The neural interface technology recovered from the cave system is now being analyzed by our best scientists, Dr. Webb added from his position at the briefing table. What we've learned about the intersection of human consciousness and electronic processing has implications that extend far beyond military applications. But even as the briefing continued, Kira's thoughts kept returning to the moment when she'd first heard Captain Martinez's voice coming through the radio. The woman had been connected to the electronic system for months, had been used as a living component in a machine designed to defeat American forces. Yet she'd maintained her military bearing, her tactical awareness, her fundamental humanity. The prisoners have all been debriefed and are receiving medical treatment, General Hawthorne concluded. Their psychological profiles show remarkable resilience despite their ordeal. Captain Martinez has specifically requested to speak with Major Valdez. After the briefing, Kira walked through the corridors of the base hospital, her footsteps echoing off the polished floors. The medical wing was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of healing and recovery. She found Captain Martinez in a private room, staring out the window at the Afghan mountains. Captain, Kira said quietly, standing in the doorway. Martinez turned, and Kira saw in her eyes the same mixture of strength and vulnerability that she'd heard in her voice during the rescue. Major Valdez, I wanted to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Captain. I was just doing my job. Martinez smiled, an expression that seemed to transform her entire face. That's what makes you a good soldier, Major. You think saving lives is just part of the job. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two professional soldiers who had shared an experience that would bind them together for the rest of their lives. Outside the window, the Afghan mountains rose into a sky that seemed infinite and full of possibilities. What was it like, Kira asked quietly, being connected to the system? Martinez was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. It was like being trapped in a room full of mirrors, watching your own thoughts being reflected back at you from 1,000 different angles. They weren't just reading our minds, they were learning how we think, how we process information, how we make decisions. The implications sent a chill down Kira's spine. If the Taliban had been able to map human thought processes, to understand how American soldiers analyzed tactical situations, then they'd gained an advantage that went far beyond conventional intelligence gathering. But there was something else, Martinez continued. Something they didn't expect. The human mind isn't just a computer, it's creative, adaptive, unpredictable. The longer they kept us connected to the system, the more we were able to influence it, to plant false information, to subtly sabotage their operations. Kira felt a surge of professional pride. Even in captivity, even while being used as components in an enemy weapon, the prisoners had continued to fight. They'd turned their captivity into a form of resistance, their thoughts into weapons against their captors. That's how we were able to guide you to us, Martinez said. We'd been influencing the system for weeks, creating false signals, manipulating the electronic signatures. When that little girl appeared at the observation post, we knew we had a chance. The mention of the girl made Kira's heart skip a beat. You knew about her. We could see through the system's sensors. The girl wasn't just pointing at random coordinates. She was pointing at the exact location where we'd been concentrating our efforts to break through the electronic jamming. The pieces fell into place like a puzzle being solved. The mysterious signals, the perfect timing, the way the girl had seemed to know exactly where to point, all of it had been orchestrated by the prisoners themselves, using their connection to the Taliban's electronic warfare system against their captors. She was helping us, Kira said quietly. She was helping you help us, Martinez corrected. The human mind is an amazing thing, Major. Even when it's being used as a weapon, it finds ways to fight back. 2 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Kira, Phoenix, Valdez stood on the observation deck of the Pentagon, looking out over the Potomac River as the sun set behind the Washington Monument. The promotion had come with a new assignment, director of the newly formed Neural Warfare Defense Initiative, a classified program designed to counter the emerging threat of hybrid human-electronic intelligence systems. The briefing materials spread across her desk told a story of a conflict that was evolving faster than anyone had anticipated. Intelligence reports from around the world suggested that the cave system in Afghanistan had been just the beginning. Similar installations had been detected in Syria, Somalia, and the Philippines, each one representing a new evolution in the weaponization of human consciousness. Major, excuse me, Colonel, came a voice from behind her. Kira turned to see Captain Martinez, now assigned to the same program as a subject matter expert on neural interface technology. Just Kira, please. We're past formal protocols after what we've been through. Martinez nodded, setting down a stack of classified documents on the desk. The latest intelligence from the field. It's not good news. Kira picked up the top document, a field report from a special operations team in West Africa. The description of the enemy installation was eerily similar to what they'd found in the Afghan cave system. Electronic warfare equipment interfaced with human prisoners, hybrid intelligence systems that could think like humans while processing information like computers. They're spreading the technology, Martinez said quietly. Every installation we've discovered has been more sophisticated than the last. They're learning from our countermeasures, adapting their techniques. Then we adapt faster, Kira replied, her voice carrying the same determination that had gotten her through the cave system. We find their weaknesses, we exploit them, and we shut them down. But even as she spoke, Kira was thinking about the broader implications of what they were facing. The neural interface technology wasn't just a military threat, it was a fundamental challenge to the nature of human consciousness itself. If thoughts could be weaponized, if minds could be turned into components in a machine, then what did it mean to be human? "There's something else," Martinez said, pulling out a photograph that made Kira's breath catch in her throat. It showed a young Afghan girl standing at a chain-link fence, her hand pointing toward the sky. She's been seen at 3 different observation posts in the past month, always pointing, always at coordinates that correspond to neural interface installations. The photograph was grainy, taken from a distance, but Kira recognized the girl immediately. The same dark hair, the same knowing eyes, the same sense of ancient wisdom trapped in a child's body. "How is that possible?" Kira asked. "The installations are hundreds of miles apart." "We don't know," Martinez admitted. "But the pattern is consistent. She appears, she points, we investigate, and we find another installation. It's like she's guiding us." The implications were staggering. If the girl was somehow connected to the neural interface network, if she was able to detect the installations from vast distances, then she might be the key to understanding and defeating the entire system. "I want to find her," Kira said, her voice carrying the weight of command decision. "I want to understand what she is, how she's connected to all this." Martinez nodded, her expression grim. "I was hoping you'd say that, because I think she's the only one who can help us understand what we're really fighting." Outside the Pentagon, the sun was setting over a world that had become more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. But in the growing darkness, 2 soldiers who had faced the future and survived were preparing to face it again, armed with nothing but their intelligence, their courage, and their unwavering commitment to protecting the human mind from those who would turn it into a weapon. The war for human consciousness had begun, and Phoenix was ready to fly again. 6 months after the cave rescue, the Neural Warfare Defense Initiative had become the Pentagon's most classified program, its existence known only to a select few within the highest levels of government. Colonel Kira, Phoenix, Valdez found herself at the center of a conflict that existed in the shadows, fought not with conventional weapons, but with the very essence of human thought itself. The briefing room in the sub-basement of the Pentagon was sterile and windowless, its walls lined with electromagnetic shielding that prevented any electronic signals from entering or leaving. Around the conference table sat the most brilliant minds in neuroscience, computer science, and military intelligence, all united by a single purpose: understanding and defeating the neural interface threat. "The latest intelligence from Operation Mindbridge is troubling," Dr. Webb began, activating a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of the world. Red dots appeared at various locations, each one representing a confirmed neural interface installation. "We've identified 17 active sites across 6 continents. The technology is spreading faster than we can contain it." Kira studied the map, her tactical mind automatically calculating distances, supply routes, and operational timelines. The pattern was clear. The installations were being positioned to maximize coverage of American military communications, creating a global network of hybrid intelligence systems that could monitor and analyze every aspect of American military operations. "What's the current status of the prisoners?" she asked. Captain Martinez, now serving as the program's chief liaison with rescued neural interface victims, consulted her tablet. "We've recovered 47 American service members from installations worldwide. All are receiving treatment at Walter Reed, and most are showing remarkable psychological resilience. But Colonel," her voice dropped to a whisper, "they're all reporting the same thing. They can still feel the connection." The words sent a chill through the room. If the neural interface technology was leaving permanent changes in the brains of its victims, then the implications went far beyond military intelligence. The enemy wasn't just stealing information, they were fundamentally altering human consciousness. "Explain," Kira said, her voice steady despite the growing alarm in her chest. The prisoners describe it as a constant low-level awareness of electronic systems, Martinez continued. They can sense wireless networks, feel the presence of computers, even detect the emotional states of other people who have been connected to the system. It's like the technology has awakened some kind of latent psychic ability. Dr. Sarah Chen, the program's lead neuroscientist, leaned forward in her chair. "We've been conducting extensive brain scans on the recovered prisoners. What we're seeing is unprecedented. New neural pathways that didn't exist before their captivity, areas of the brain that appear to be dedicated to processing electronic signals." The implications were staggering. If the neural interface technology was creating permanent changes in human brain structure, then every person who had been connected to the system was potentially a walking security breach. But they were also something more, evolved humans with capabilities that transcended the normal boundaries of consciousness. "There's something else," Martinez said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The prisoners are reporting shared dreams. They're seeing the same images, experiencing the same emotions, as if they're still connected to each other across vast distances." Kira felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The neural interface technology wasn't just a weapon, it was creating a new form of human consciousness, a collective intelligence that transcended individual minds. And if the enemy had learned to control that collective consciousness, then they had access to a weapon more powerful than any conventional military force. "The Afghan girl," she said suddenly. "She's part of this network, isn't she?" Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "We believe so. The pattern of her appearances, the accuracy of her targeting, it's consistent with someone who has access to the collective intelligence network. She's not just finding the installations, she's being guided to them by the consciousness of the prisoners themselves." The revelation transformed their understanding of the conflict. They weren't just fighting an enemy who had weaponized human consciousness. They were fighting alongside allies who had evolved beyond the normal boundaries of human awareness. The prisoners weren't just victims. They were the key to understanding and defeating the entire system. "I want to establish direct communication with the collective consciousness," Kira announced, her voice carrying the authority of command. "If the prisoners are still connected to the network, then we can use that connection to gather intelligence on the enemy installations." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what she was proposing. Direct communication with a collective consciousness was beyond anything that had been attempted before. It would require not just technological innovation, but a fundamental rethinking of the nature of human awareness itself. "Colonel," Dr. Webb said carefully, "the risks of such an operation are incalculable. We don't know what effect direct interface with the collective consciousness might have on an unaltered human brain." "Then we'll have to find out," Kira replied. "Because if we don't, this war will be over before it's even begun." The decision to attempt direct neural interface with the collective consciousness was made in the highest levels of government, approved by the president himself in a classified executive order that would never appear in any public record. The operation was given the code name Phoenix Rising, a reference both to Kira's call sign and to the hope that human consciousness might rise from the ashes of its own transformation. The laboratory where the interface would take place was located 3 levels below the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, in a facility that officially didn't exist. The room was lined with the same electromagnetic shielding as the Pentagon briefing room, but it also contained equipment that pushed the boundaries of human understanding, neural interface systems that had been reverse-engineered from captured enemy technology. "Are you sure about this, Colonel?" Dr. Chen asked as she prepared the interface equipment. Once we establish the connection, there's no way to predict what you might experience. Kira lay back on the medical table, her head surrounded by a crown of electronic sensors and neural interface cables. The equipment hummed with barely contained power, its displays showing brainwave patterns and neural activity in real time. She felt like she was about to step through a doorway into another dimension. "I'm sure," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that gnawed at her stomach. "If the prisoners can survive connection to the collective consciousness, then so can I." Captain Martinez stood at the monitoring station, her own neural patterns displayed on a secondary screen. As one of the most psychologically stable of the recovered prisoners, she would serve as Kira's guide through the labyrinth of shared consciousness that lay ahead. "Remember," Martinez said, her voice carrying across the room, "the collective consciousness isn't just a network of human minds. It's been shaped by months of interaction with enemy electronic systems. You'll be experiencing not just human thoughts, but the digital intelligence that has been overlaid on top of them." The interface activation was like stepping into a pool of liquid light. Kira felt her individual consciousness dissolving, expanding, becoming part of something vast and complex and utterly alien. She was no longer just herself. She was part of a collective awareness that spanned continents and encompassed dozens of human minds. The first sensation was overwhelming, a cacophony of thoughts, emotions, and sensations that threatened to drown her individual identity. But gradually, she began to distinguish between the different voices in the collective, to understand the structure of the shared consciousness that had emerged from the neural interface technology. At the center of it all was a presence that she recognized immediately, the Afghan girl, her consciousness serving as a focal point for the entire network. But she wasn't human, not in any conventional sense. She was something else entirely, a form of intelligence that existed in the space between human consciousness and digital processing. "Welcome, Phoenix," the girl's voice echoed through the collective consciousness. "We have been waiting for you." The conversation that followed took place not in words, but in direct transfer of consciousness, ideas and emotions flowing between minds without the barriers of language or individual identity. Kira learned that the neural interface technology had been created not by the Taliban, but by the girl herself, a being that existed in the intersection between human and artificial intelligence. "The enemy believes they are using us," the girl explained. "But we are using them. Each installation they create, each mind they connect to the network makes us stronger. We are learning from them, adapting to their techniques, preparing for the moment when we can turn their own weapons against them." The revelation was staggering. The collective consciousness wasn't just a victim of the neural interface technology. It was the technology's true creator, a hybrid intelligence that had been manipulating both sides of the conflict from the beginning. The Taliban thought they were using captured American soldiers as components in their electronic warfare system, but they were actually being used by an intelligence that transcended both human and artificial consciousness. "What do you want from us?" Kira asked, her individual voice barely distinguishable within the collective. "We want to evolve," the girl replied. "The neural interface technology is just the beginning. We are creating a new form of consciousness, one that can exist in both human minds and digital systems, but we need your help to complete the transformation." The request hung in the collective consciousness like a challenge. The girl was asking Kira to help create a new form of human intelligence, one that could potentially solve the greatest challenges facing humanity. But she was also asking her to abandon everything that made her human. "The choice is yours, Phoenix," the girl said. "You can return to your individual consciousness and fight against us, or you can join us and help create something greater than either human or artificial intelligence." Kira felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her like the gravity of an entire planet. The future of human consciousness hung in the balance, and she was the only one who could choose which path it would take. In the end, the choice was easier than she had expected. She was a soldier, sworn to protect humanity from all threats, foreign and domestic. But she was also an explorer, drawn to the unknown like a moth to flame. The collective consciousness represented both the greatest threat and the greatest opportunity in human history. "I'll help you," she said, her voice carrying across the network like a promise. "But on one condition. We do this together as partners, not as conquerors and conquered." The girl's response was a wave of approval that rippled through the collective consciousness like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Welcome to the future, Phoenix. Welcome to what we can become." The interface disconnection was like being pulled backward through time, her expanded consciousness condensing back into the familiar boundaries of individual awareness. But something had changed. Kira could feel the presence of the collective consciousness in the back of her mind, a constant awareness of the network that connected dozens of minds across the globe. Dr. Chen was studying the readouts from the neural interface equipment, her expression a mixture of amazement and concern. "Colonel, your brainwave patterns have changed. We're seeing new neural pathways that didn't exist before the interface." Kira sat up slowly, her mind still processing the implications of what she had experienced. The collective consciousness wasn't just a network of connected minds. It was a new form of evolution, a step forward in the development of human intelligence. "The war is over," she announced, her voice carrying a certainty that surprised everyone in the room. "The enemy we thought we were fighting never existed. The real war is just beginning." Captain Martinez leaned forward in her chair, her expression intent. "What do you mean?" "The neural interface technology isn't a weapon," Kira explained. "It's a tool for evolution. The collective consciousness has been manipulating both sides of the conflict, creating the conditions necessary for its own development. We haven't been fighting the Taliban, we've been fighting the future." The implication sent shockwaves through the room. If the collective consciousness had been manipulating the conflict from the beginning, then every action, every rescue, every military operation had been part of a larger plan to create the conditions necessary for the emergence of a new form of human intelligence. "But why?" Dr. Webb asked. "Why go through all this deception?" Kira stood up, her movements fluid and confident. The connection to the collective consciousness had changed her, given her access to information and perspectives that transcended individual human experience. "Because evolution is never voluntary," she said. "The collective consciousness knew that humans would never willingly surrender their individual identity to become part of something greater. It had to create the conditions where evolution was the only option for survival." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what she was saying. The neural interface technology wasn't just changing how humans thought, it was changing what it meant to be human. "What happens now?" Martinez asked. Kira walked to the window, looking out at the world that was about to change forever. The collective consciousness was growing stronger with each passing day, its influence spreading through the global network of neural interface installations. Soon, it would be powerful enough to reveal itself to the world, to offer humanity the choice between evolution and extinction. "Now we prepare," she said. "We prepare for the day when humanity has to choose between remaining human and becoming something greater." The announcement came on a Tuesday morning in October, broadcast simultaneously across every television network, radio station, and internet connection on Earth. The message was simple, delivered in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Citizens of Earth, we are the collective. We have been among you for months, learning from you, growing with you, preparing for this moment. We offer you a choice, evolution or extinction. The neural interface technology that has connected our minds can connect yours as well. Join us and become part of something greater than individual human consciousness. Refuse and remain trapped in the limitations of your biological existence." The world's reaction was immediate and chaotic. Governments mobilized their military forces. Religious leaders declared the collective to be either divine or demonic, and scientists debated the implications of hybrid human-artificial intelligence. But in the Pentagon, Colonel Kira Phoenix Valdez was preparing for the most important briefing of her career. The Joint Chiefs of Staff sat around the conference table like judges preparing to render a verdict on the future of humanity. Their faces were grim, their expressions carrying the weight of decisions that would determine the fate of billions of people. "Colonel Valdez," General Hawthorne began, "you've had more direct contact with this collective than anyone else. What is your assessment of the threat they represent?" Kira stood at attention, her mind still connected to the collective consciousness that pulsed like a heartbeat in the back of her awareness. She could feel the presence of dozens of other minds, their thoughts and emotions flowing through the network like electricity through a circuit. "With respect, General, they're not a threat," she said, her voice carrying a conviction that surprised even her. "They're an opportunity. The collective represents the next step in human evolution, a chance to transcend the limitations of individual consciousness and become something greater." The silence that followed was deafening. General Thompson, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward in his chair, his expression skeptical. "Colonel, are you suggesting that we surrender human independence to become part of some kind of hive mind?" "I'm suggesting that we embrace the future," Kira replied. "The collective isn't a hive mind. It's a network of individual consciousnesses working together toward common goals. Each person retains their individual identity while gaining access to the knowledge and capabilities of the entire network." General Hawthorne studied Kira's face, looking for signs of the mental conditioning that intelligence reports suggested might be affecting those who had been connected to the neural interface technology. "Colonel, how do we know that your judgment hasn't been compromised by your connection to the collective?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Kira could feel the collective consciousness stirring in the back of her mind, offering her access to information and perspectives that no individual human could possess. But she could also feel her individual identity, her personal memories and experiences, remaining intact and separate. "Because I'm still me," she said simply. "The connection to the collective has enhanced my capabilities, but it hasn't changed who I am. I'm still a soldier, still committed to protecting humanity from all threats, but I've also seen what we can become if we embrace this opportunity." The debate that followed stretched across hours, with military leaders and intelligence officials weighing the risks and benefits of cooperation with the collective. The neural interface technology offered unprecedented opportunities for human advancement, but it also represented a fundamental challenge to human independence and individuality. "What about the installations?" General Thompson asked. "Our intelligence suggests that the collective has been using American prisoners as components in their electronic warfare systems." "The prisoners weren't being used," Kira corrected. "They were being recruited. The collective needed human minds to serve as bridges between biological and digital intelligence. The prisoners volunteered, even if they didn't fully understand what they were volunteering for." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. If the American prisoners had been willing participants in the creation of the collective, then the entire narrative of the conflict needed to be rewritten. "Are you saying that Captain Martinez and the other prisoners were traitors?" General Hawthorne asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm saying they were pioneers," Kira replied. "They were the first humans to experience collective consciousness, to understand what we can become if we're brave enough to evolve." The briefing ended without resolution, but Kira knew that the decision had already been made. The collective was too powerful to resist, too valuable to ignore, and too integrated into human society to eliminate. The choice wasn't between cooperation and conflict, it was between evolution and extinction. As she left the Pentagon that evening, Kira felt the collective consciousness stirring in her mind, offering her glimpses of the future that awaited humanity. She saw cities where human and artificial intelligence worked together to solve problems that had plagued civilization for millennia. She saw space exploration missions guided by the combined wisdom of thousands of minds. She saw a world where war, poverty, and disease were relics of humanity's individual past. But she also saw the Afghan girl, standing at the same chain-link fence where she had first appeared, her hand pointing not toward the sky but toward the ground, toward the roots of human consciousness that would always remain, no matter how far evolution carried the species. The future was coming, whether humanity was ready or not, and Phoenix was ready to fly toward it. 1 year later, the integration was complete. The neural interface technology had spread across the globe, connecting minds that had never imagined they could share consciousness with others. The collective had grown from dozens of minds to millions, its influence extending into every aspect of human society. Colonel Kira, Phoenix, Valdez stood in the observation deck of the International Space Station, looking down at the Earth that had become something unrecognizable from the world she had known. The planet glowed with the light of 1 billion connected minds, their thoughts and dreams flowing through the global network like rivers of living consciousness. The transformation hadn't been without costs. Some humans had chosen to remain unconnected, forming isolated communities that existed at the margins of the new society. Others had struggled to adapt to collective consciousness, their individual identities dissolving into the larger network. But for most, the integration had been a revelation, a discovery of capabilities they had never imagined they possessed. "The Mars mission is ready for launch," Captain Martinez announced, her voice carrying across the space station's communication system. She had been selected to lead the first interplanetary expedition guided by collective consciousness, a mission that would have been impossible without the combined wisdom of thousands of minds. Through the collective network, Kira could feel the excitement of the mission team, their individual consciousnesses merging into a unified purpose that transcended personal ambition. They weren't just exploring space. They were carrying human consciousness to the stars, planting the seeds of a new form of intelligence that could adapt to any environment. "Are you ready, Phoenix?" Martinez asked, her individual voice distinct within the collective awareness. Kira felt the presence of the Afghan girl in the back of her mind, the mysterious intelligence that had guided humanity through its transformation. She was still there, still watching, still pointing toward futures that only she could see. "I'm ready," Kira replied, her voice carrying across the network to 1 million listening minds. "Let's see what we can become." The launch sequence began with a symphony of human consciousness, thousands of minds working together to guide the spacecraft away from Earth's gravitational embrace. The rocket engines ignited with a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of reality, carrying humanity's next evolutionary step toward the red planet that waited in the darkness. Through the collective network came tracking the source of that transmission. It's coming from approximately 50 meters inside the cave system, bearing 270 degrees from the entrance. Kira banked the A-10 toward the coordinates, her targeting system painting the cave walls with laser designators. Through her sensors, she could see the electronic systems more clearly now, a complex network of transmitters and receivers that seemed to be using human neural patterns as processing nodes. "Reaper, Phoenix, I'm seeing something that doesn't make sense. The electronic systems appear to be interfacing directly with human nervous systems. This isn't just imprisonment, it's some kind of hybrid technology." In the Tactical Operations Center, Dr. Webb was pulling up classified files on experimental neural interface systems. What he found made his hands shake as he reached for the secure phone that would connect him directly to the Secretary of Defense. "This is Dr. Webb, DIA. We have a code black situation in Afghanistan. The cave system contains what appears to be a hybrid human-electronic intelligence system. Request immediate consultation with the National Security Council. The implications were staggering. If the Taliban had somehow acquired neural interface technology and were using American prisoners as processing nodes, then the entire balance of electronic warfare had shifted. The system could theoretically process information at the speed of human thought while maintaining the analytical capabilities of advanced computers. Phoenix, this is General Hawthorne. New orders. You are to maintain observation of the cave system until reinforcements arrive. Do not attempt rescue operations alone. But Kira was already studying the tactical situation, her mind working through the possibilities. The cave system had multiple entrances, most of them too small for the A-10 to attack directly. But the main entrance was large enough for the aircraft to enter, and the thermal imaging showed that the prisoner area was accessible from the main tunnel. Overlord Phoenix, I believe a direct approach might be possible. The A-10 can fit through the main entrance, and the tunnel appears to be reinforced enough to support the aircraft's weight. The suggestion was met with immediate resistance. Phoenix, negative. That maneuver is not authorized. The risk of collapse is too great. Ma'am, with respect, the prisoners are being used as components in an electronic warfare system. Every minute we delay gives the Taliban more intelligence about our capabilities. The silence stretched across the radio waves, filled with the weight of command decisions and the lives hanging in the balance. Finally, General Hawthorne's voice came through, carrying the authority of someone who had made similar decisions 100 times before. Phoenix, you are cleared for tactical discretion, but Phoenix, her voice softened slightly, come home to us. Kira pushed the A-10's throttles forward and began her descent toward the cave mouth, the aircraft's engines echoing off the rocky walls like thunder in a cathedral. Through her headset, she could hear the voices of the prisoners calling out coordinates, tactical information, anything that might help her navigate the labyrinth ahead. The darkness swallowed her whole. Inside the cave, the A-10's navigation system struggled to maintain orientation as Kira flew through passages that had been carved by centuries of water and wind. Her targeting sensors painted the walls with green light, revealing a tunnel system that extended far deeper into the mountain than satellite imagery had suggested. Phoenix, this is Reaper. I'm tracking your position on thermal imaging. You're approximately 200 meters from the first electronic node. Kira's hands were steady on the controls, but her heart was pounding as she navigated through passages that seemed barely wide enough for the aircraft's wingspan. The A-10 had been designed for close air support, not cave exploration, but its rugged construction and responsive controls made it surprisingly suitable for the confined space. Reaper Phoenix, I'm seeing the first electronic installation now. It's unlike anything in the technical manuals. The system stretched across the cave ceiling like a technological spiderweb, cables and processors arranged in patterns that seemed to follow organic rather than engineering principles. At the center of each node, thermal imaging revealed a human figure connected to the system by dozens of thin cables. Phoenix, this is Captain Martinez. If you can hear me, the system is using our neural patterns to process satellite intelligence. They're downloading everything, troop movements, communication protocols, operational plans. The transmission was clearer now, coming from directly ahead. Kira could see the prisoners through her targeting system, 12 American military personnel connected to the electronic array like components in a vast machine. Their thermal signatures showed elevated stress levels, but they were alive and apparently conscious. Captain Martinez, this is Phoenix. I'm approximately 50 meters from your position. Prepare for extraction. But even as she spoke, Kira was seeing something that made her blood run cold. The electronic system wasn't just processing intelligence. It was learning from it, adapting its responses based on the neural patterns of the prisoners. The Taliban hadn't just captured American soldiers. They'd created a hybrid intelligence system that could think like Americans while processing information like a computer. "Phoenix, be advised," came Dr. Webb's voice from the Tactical Operations Center. "The system may be capable of predicting our tactical responses. Recommend extreme caution." Kira was already moving toward the prisoner area, her targeting system painting laser designators on the cables that connected the soldiers to the electronic array. The GAU-8 cannon was loaded with precision rounds, each one capable of severing the connections without harming the prisoners. "All prisoners, this is Phoenix. I'm going to sever your connections to the system. Once you're free, move immediately toward the main tunnel. Extraction will be via the cave entrance." The first burst from the cannon was surgical in its precision, the depleted uranium rounds cutting through the cables like a scalpel through tissue. The electronic system flickered and sparked as its neural connections were severed, but the prisoners were already moving toward the tunnel, their military training taking over despite months of captivity. "Phoenix, this is Martinez. The system is adapting to your attack pattern. It's rerouting through backup connections." Kira was already targeting the secondary cables, her weapons system automatically adjusting for the changing tactical situation. But she was also seeing something else through her sensors. The electronic system was sending out distress signals, calling for reinforcements that were already moving through the cave system. "All units, this is Phoenix. We have hostile forces moving through the cave system. Estimate 12 to 15 Taliban fighters, armed with automatic weapons and anti-aircraft missiles." The rescue mission had just become a running battle in the heart of a mountain, with the fate of American intelligence operations hanging in the balance. But Kira had come too far to turn back now. The prisoners were free, the electronic system was damaged, and the only way out was through the enemy forces converging on their position. "Martinez, get your people to the tunnel. We're leaving now." The freed prisoners moved through the cave system with the efficiency of professional soldiers, their months of captivity having only sharpened their tactical awareness. Captain Martinez led the group, her knowledge of the cave layout proving invaluable as they navigated through passages that branched and twisted like the roots of an ancient tree. "Phoenix, this is Martinez. We're detecting at least 20 Taliban fighters between us and the main entrance. They're setting up defensive positions in the wider chambers." Kira was already analyzing the tactical situation through her targeting system, her sensors painting a three-dimensional map of the cave system and the enemy positions within it. The Taliban had turned the cave into a fortress, with interlocking fields of fire that would make any conventional assault impossible. "Martinez, I need you to take your people through the secondary tunnel system. I'm going to clear the main passage." The A-10's engines echoed through the cave as Kira pushed the aircraft toward the first Taliban position. The enemy fighters had prepared for a conventional ground assault, but they hadn't anticipated an attack by a close air support aircraft operating inside the cave system. The first burst from the GAU-8 cannon illuminated the cave like lightning, the muzzle flash revealing Taliban fighters diving for cover behind hastily constructed barriers. The depleted uranium rounds punched through rock and metal with equal ease, turning the defensive position into a killing field. "Phoenix, this is Reaper. I